Hello and welcome to the Talking City podcast. My name is Parkinson. I'm delighted today to be joined, as always, by Simon Bajkowski. Before we get into the pod, I just want to read this to you. Very soon, you'll be able to watch this podcast live on our Facebook page as it happens in real time, as well as being able to tune in on YouTube of an evening the same day. And of course, the audio product wherever you get your podcasts. It's very exciting. If you aren't already subscribed, head over to the Man City MEN Facebook page and search Talking City on YouTube. It's all free. Don't have to pay a penny to join us. Now, on with the show. Simon, it was a win for City on Wednesday night against Burnley. I think we sort of expected it to be maybe 4-0 rather than 3-1. I think Ederson will be a bit disappointed that he didn't get his clean sheet bonus at that late goal, but just want to run through the game with us. City took a 3-0 lead. Didn't expect Burnley to offer much after that, but they fought back. They got a goal. What happened?
Yeah, it was as expected, and it's hard to get too excited about things when they turn out as expected. But the hard work still needs to go in to make sure that happens. Plenty of excitement at the start. Like Kevin De Bruyne was making his first start since the first game of the season, and then the other surprise was kind of Matheus Nunes, who came into the team and no one really knew where he was going to play, and I still think he doesn't know entirely where he's going to play. But he was very good and created the first goal for Julian Alvarez. A quick free kick for the second goal inside kind of 22 minutes, and you sort of feel like the game was won at that point. But for good measure, Rodri slapped in a third just as the second half started. Return of Erling Haaland in the second half, which was another big positive. John Stones played a full match. The only disappointment, as you say, was really the wiping out of the clean sheet at the end. Josko Gvardiol, not great, switching off at the end to let Burnley get a goal back. That's the first goal Burnley have scored against City in 5 years, which is slightly staggering, but helps you to kind of understand why everyone did expect City to win this game so comfortably. I suppose not that you took anything away from the night, but it felt quite low key, and it felt like the bigger story of the night was always going to be what happened between Liverpool and Chelsea at Anfield, and Liverpool with a big win that kind of reasserts the fact that City aren't likely to sort of have this title race all their own way, because they're still 5 points off top.
Yeah, so let's just run through the game chronologically then. Pep's unusual celebration after City's second goal. So obviously I was watching it from TV, from home, and you saw it and you're thinking like, why against Burnley at 2-0 is he reacting like that? So from what you saw in the press box and what was said in the press conference afterwards, just for anybody who's not seen that or not heard that, we just want to run through that. Yeah,
so basically when City scored, they had a free kick about 30 yards out from goal, and they piled everyone into the box, and De Bruyne got ready to take it. And then kind of as the Burnley, it was only maybe a two-man wall, as the wall jumped up to kind of stop the ball going into the box, the ball had in fact been kind of fizzed along the floor straight into the box, and Alvarez was there to slot it into the bottom corner. So, everyone loves when a free kick routine comes off. I think that Dutch goal against Argentina in the World Cup was one of the goals of the tournament for that kind of just sheer sensation of something coming off like that. But City score, Gvardiol celebrates, goes straight over to one of his backroom staff, Carlos Vicens, and celebrates with him. Basically, City in their kind of week in Abu Dhabi when they were training put a lot of work into set pieces, dead balls. Vicens, when he came up from the academy in 2021, he was given the role of sorting out City set pieces because they'd never kind of been great at them. Like, they've been okay, but there was kind of the opportunity there to do something with them, and they had an amazing season. They scored 21 goals from set pieces and conceded just one. It was a Premier League. It smashed the Premier League record, and no one's come close since. But City have slipped a bit since as well. So it's kind of a recognition when they went away to train in Abu Dhabi that set pieces is something that we can maybe look at and do better at. And since they've come back, Nathan Ake's goal from the corner at Tottenham was the winner. And then Burnley, the second game in a row where these set pieces are already paying off for City. So that's why Gvardiol was kind of happy enough to go over to Vincennes to let him sort of take the credit, because, you know, it is a team effort. Pep can't do everything himself. So yeah, that was kind of his coach is coming good and the players on the pitch executing it. And, you know, it's no surprise either that Ake's goal came from a De Bruyne corner and Alvarez's goal was a De Bruyne free kick.
Yeah, because it sort of paints a bit of a, you know, peek behind the curtain as well with what he was saying in the post-match press conference, because a lot of people just credit Pep with being this genius, but he sort of alluded to a bit, because I think he said, I don't want to quote unquote this, but he said basically, I'm not good enough or I don't have enough time. He sort of corrected himself with it by basically saying he handed that over to Carlos and Jack, and it sort of gives you an insight as to how important Pep's backroom staff are to maintaining this level and to producing what City do.
Yeah, and, you know, Pep has had success despite losing kind of members of his backroom staff, but you would also kind of look at the period, you know, the only year City didn't win the title was the year when Arteta left midway through the season to join Arsenal, and I'm not for 1 second suggesting that they lost the title because he lost Arteta, because that would be silly, but the feeling over the second half of the season, because he lost his sort of long-time assistant the year before that, was that he was just taking on too much, and he was kind of had too many responsibilities and was trying to do more than he does and more than he's good at. And then obviously the pandemic came, and after the pandemic he gets his long-time friend and mentor Juan Marlilo in on the backroom staff, and things become more balanced and better. And, you know, Vincennes joins in 2021. So they've kept tweaking it. And, you know, they lost 2 assistants in summer in Rodolfo Borrell and Enzo Maresca, but Lilo came back and brought his right-hand man. So there feels like there's a balance, because, yeah, it's like the goalkeeping coach who gets a mention every so often is so important for the goalkeepers, because as much as Pep can look after sort of, you know, some aspects for Edison or Ortega and whatever, he can't really train them. You know, it'd be like me telling you how to produce a video. Like, there's no world in which I can say anything that will make you, you know, think about, oh yeah, that would be quite good, because it's a specialist role, and Pep doesn't have those skills, and why should he? So yeah, it is the big team at City that is very, very important in supporting Pep and kind of making him be the best that he can be.
Yeah, you do see a lot, don't you, in business and stuff, where it's like the best bosses are the people who are good at delegating rather than just taking everything on themselves. So it's good to see, and it's sort of, again, it's sort of good to see a little peek behind the curtain as well with the art of Manchester City.
Yeah, and it was really interesting actually in the pre-match press conference. Guardiola talking about why he thinks he's a better manager than he used to be, and his feeling was that he used to work 24 hours. Like every day. He used to be obsessive, and he used to be obsessed with everything to do with it, because he thought that he wasn't being professional, or that he was like not sort of finding what he needed to find if he didn't work all those hours. And now he's learned that he can do what he needs to do without needing to be so switched on all the time, so he can relax more. And so, you know, all it was topical because Jurgen Klopp's leaving because he's low on energy. Like, you look at Guardiola and he looks like he's got more energy than when he started at City, because he's got that support network, but also he's learned to be more efficient and more effective. And, you know, without this turning into like a business leadership podcast, like, that is really important. And if you look at sort of the best leaders or whatever, they will say that time management and, you know, learning to be the best and most productive version of yourself is so important.
I'm going to use this as a good transition. A good leader knows when to make changes and keep people in. So we saw Nunes come in for Kovacic side on Wednesday night. Why? Basically, he played well, but why?
Yeah, I think a lot of rotation was needed just because we're not in this we're in a very strange, or we have been in a very strange window for City where they've not had many games. Like we're coming back to games every 3 days, and that's going to be great. But rotation is kind of necessary then because you need to rest players. But when you've not played in so long, you need minutes in the legs for rhythm. And we've seen Kovacic have played very well at Tottenham, but has played in January and done really well. And, Nunes has not been as involved. So if you want Nunes to be part of the squad in February and March and know that, he's an important player to start or to bring off the bench, you need him to have those minutes in the legs. It's the same with Rico Lewis, who started ahead of Kyle Walker. So you need those players to play. And then as well, it's probably, a useful opportunity with a favourable fixture at home against one of the worst teams in the division to let Nunes be Nunes and see if he can sort of mould his way into the team, because he's still quite such an interesting profile for the team. And we saw it again. He reminded me a lot of João Cancelo a lot of the game, especially with wearing his old number. He was sort of popping up at the side of both boxes, and it was a real kind of roaming performance. But he's definitely not Ilkay Gundogan. But he showed kind of what different skills he does have. So it was a really interesting night for Nunes, and one of his most positive ones.
Well, the benefit is that a player comes in, that's their chance to impress, and it feels that he's done that, which gives Pep a bit of a headache now going into Monday night's game. Obviously, Bernardo Silva was on the bench as well, so you sort of expect him to come back in. So then, it's like a positive negative, like that you've got all these players available fighting for a place. We will talk about the Kyle Walker, Rico Lewis situation, I make it sound worse than it probably is. We will discuss why Kyle Walker was on the bench in part 2. But before we do end part 1, Si, I just want to talk to you about Gvardiol. You mentioned him earlier on. We said on the last podcast we were on together that the jury's still out on him, and he hasn't set the world alight. And I think you gave him a 5 in your player rating. I think he was the lowest rated player in the team that you gave, probably for Burnley's goal, I would imagine, based on that. But he has sort of failed to grasp it. Now, could that be first season syndrome under Pep Guardiola, or do you think there's a bit more to it?
I think it's first season syndrome, and I think it's playing out of position, really. I know Pep has kind of defended his decisions and say, I saw him when he was a left back and he was great. But you speak to the player and you don't get the sense that left back is where he enjoys playing and where he's comfortable playing. And, we saw at the World Cup how amazing he was at centre back. And he's obviously done it for Leipzig and earlier in his career. So, it still seems a bit odd that they've bought this centre back for a marquee fee and are playing him at left back and continuing to play him at left back despite kind of him continuing to show that he's not kind of the most positionally aware at left back as you need to be. It's like we get to this stage in the season again and you sort of think, what are City going to do at left back? You would imagine, these big months of the season coming up that Nathan Ake will probably slide across to left back with, Diaz or Stones or Akanji in the middle. I would be very surprised to see Gvardiol still in the team for kind of United at home, Liverpool away, that kind of run. Because when you look at it, he's not playing as well as the other defenders are, and you do feel for him because it's his first season and he's not a left back, and he's only 21 as well, which is really, really young for such an important position at an important team. But, unfortunately for him, you're just talking about the competition for places. Like there are more defenders that are better than him than there are places in the team at the minute.
Yeah, and like you say, he's only in his early 20s. But one thing I want to throw to you before we move on to the break and we move on to part 2, I feel that City have never really cemented a left back since, is it Kolarov? Was Kolarov the last sort of proper downright left back? And then before that was Gael Clichy. Feels that City's left back position is one that they've never seemed to just absolutely nail.
Yeah, I mean, Kolarov was a left back until Gvardiol came in and said, no, he's going to be a centre back now. So it's one of those things. Obviously, Mendy was the big buy. That didn't work out. They've had, Danilo came as a right back who could play left back. Cancelo obviously nailed the position for a year and a half. They've had Zinchenko there. They've had Fabian Delph there. It really kind of supports the idea that, left back is nobody wants to be a left back. It's the worst position on the pitch because anyone can play left back. Stick them in. But, we're coming up to like the year anniversary of Pep just deciding he played Bernardo Silva there, kind of not have a left back. But yeah, when someone does drop into left back and it really clicks, it is amazing. And, last season, once Ake went in there, he was really quite formidable, and Akanji did a terrific role as well in some very difficult matches, like the Real Madrid one. So, the thing you always have with City left backs is as much frustration as there may be at not buying one. It's kind of like, well, who would you buy? There doesn't seem to be many options, sort of, and we're talking probably like, last 6 years, you could say this. There's been some kind of why aren't City buying a left back? There've never really been many options. If you could say, right, you can get Robertson next week, then I'm sure City would. But aside from him, there really aren't too many people who you think would come in and really make a difference.
Yeah, well, we're going to end part one there, Si, and we have, just want to let the listeners know, half term's coming up. If you've got kids and you're living in the Manchester area, Manchester City have got the stadium tour that they're pushing. We've teamed up with them to give away one listener the chance to go on that stadium tour and experience the incredible features, the virtual press room and everything. I'm going to play an ad in a second, which is me, so bear with me. It'll be me linking to myself. So we'll be back in part 2 in just a second, but if you want to enter that competition, here is how. We've teamed up with Manchester City to bring one listener the ultimate Manchester City fan experience. Immerse yourself in City's state-of-the-art stadium tour experience, featuring all 3 of the treble winners' trophies, as well as a first-hand feel as you walk out from the Etihad Stadium glass tunnel. But that's not all. Not only will you have a full tour of the stadium in all its glory, you will sit in Pep Guardiola's seat on the touchline to soak up that matchday feel, as well as experience the newly updated virtual press room, where you can sit next to the likes of Pep Guardiola himself, Manuel Akanji, Nathan Ake, and Erling Haaland. If you want to be in with a chance of winning this fantastic prize, all you have to do is subscribe to the Talking City podcast and leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and email a screenshot with your name, location, and contact information to talkingcitypod. That's talkingcitypod @gmail.com, and we will announce the winner very soon. Good luck. Well, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. My name is Seb Parkinson, joined by Simon Bajkowski still. Not left me yet. Si, would you take your kids on the City Stadium tour? I know you're not a City fan.
Yeah, I would. I see bits of it kind of whenever I'm at the stadium, and it's very good. And there was a celebrity, one of my most treasured Twitter followers, who I don't know at all. It's one of those, when you just like, you follow someone and then they follow you back, and you're like, oh, very pleased with that. I saw they'd. No, you don't.
You don't follow me actually. I follow you.
Do I not follow you?
You don't, Si. I'm very upset. I've been meaning to ask you about it.
I'll change that. I'll change that next thing. Maybe I thought it was too much time had gone by, but We'll move on from that quickly. But they had said they'd taken their kids on the city tour, and it was great. And that was point being made was that as well. It's kind of like cheaper and more available than a match. So in these times where we're all counting the cost of everything, it's quite a nice way to get sort of like the feel of the stadium and the dugout and everything that's going on, and there's a lot of interactive things that are quite fun. So yeah, it's good.
Moving on back to the game, I want to discuss some points from the game that we couldn't get in part one. But my first point to mention to you is we've obviously seen the news that's about Kyle Walker, the interview, the revelation, and everything. Pep Guardiola was asked in his press conference pre-game, is Kyle Walker going to remain your captain? And he basically just said, that's not up to me, it's up to the group. Kyle Walker then didn't play against Burnley. Now, do we read between the lines and say he's been kept out of the firing line, or is this just rotation?
I would think it was rotation. Because, this isn't the first time Walker has been making headlines on the front page of newspapers. And it's not even the first time for this very thing. Like, I've been quite surprised by the reaction from some fans this week, to be honest, because, although there are more details from Walker or whatever, like, it's still effectively the same story that was on the front of the Sun like a few weeks ago. So, like, there haven't really been any more revelations. It's just that it's coming out of the mouth of Kyle Walker rather than, a newspaper who you might prefer to, not to believe it until a player actually says it. And that's why the reaction has come this week. But, it's not exactly new. So I was quite surprised by sort of some calls that, we should strip him of the captaincy and all this, I think one of the things that the players really like about Pep as a manager with his man management is that he will back them 100% in times like this. And, he just refused to answer any questions on it. And, he said, he will remain the captain because that's not my choice. But you sort of get the feeling that if he did have a choice, he would keep him as captain anyway. So I would be tempted to say that it was simply rotation, a bit more like Nunes coming in for Kovacic, where, he expects Lewis to need some minutes this month. And that is better when Lewis has got sort of a full match under his belt.
Yeah, because we talked, didn't we, in the last pod about City's upcoming fixtures are quite favourable. We had that chat about can they win the treble again, and we sort of laid out the upcoming games, said who is going to beat them, who is going to stop them. So in a way, for Pep, it's good to, whilst he's got a sort of run of, I don't want to say easier games because there's no easy game, but more favourable games to get some minutes in those, like especially Copenhagen coming up as well, and that's a game Pep will want to win simply because his eyeball is always looking at the Champions League. But moving on then to another sort of question that came out in the post-match press conference with Pep. Obviously, Erling Haaland made his return from injury, played 20 minutes or something, and was asked would he have played more minutes or less minutes. And I think Pep just said if we were 7-0 up, he'd have probably played less minutes, and if we were losing 1-0, he'd have probably played more minutes. But the questions from that are basically what happens now with Julian Alvarez. Does he get dropped? Can he play together? Pep said that they can play together, but will they? What are your thoughts on Julian Alvarez's future now, given the imminent return? He's been fantastic this season as well. Don't forget, he's scored and assisted in, is he played 21? He scored 10, assisted 5 or something like that off the top of my head. Probably more. Yeah,
he has, although I think his scoring had kind of dried up a bit before Wednesday night. So it was very timely 2 goals for him to kind of step up and say, no, I can still play number 9, remember. I think, the energy that you saw from Haaland when he came on and that kind of like just incessant desire to get a goal is something that has been missed. Alvarez is a very good footballer and he's such a team player and he's always looking to sort of, link up and be involved or whatever. I don't know. There's something quite sad satisfying to watch about someone who is just has their eyes so focused on goal. It's like that kid in the playground who just picks it up and will not pass to anyone, just dribbles until he scores or gets tackled. Although, having said that, there were a few occasions where Haaland passed where he maybe shouldn't have done, and also a few occasions where he was crying out for the ball, and it was predominantly Doku who didn't give it to him. So I think, it's obviously you can't ignore Haaland, but Alvarez has performed to a level where he still he still should get plenty of minutes and plenty of starts, and he will be putting pressure on the likes of Doku and Bernardo Silva and Phil Foden and Jack Grealish, and he's in that pool, and Kevin De Bruyne, because how often and how much can De Bruyne play. Alvarez is a real option for a lot of minutes. He will be a key player for the second half of the season. He just won't be as key as Erling Haaland.
Yeah, so just to clarify, Alvarez has played 32, scored 15, assisted 10. Now, despite the fact that it feels like Erling Haaland hasn't kicked a ball this season, he's been out what feels like that long, he has played 23 and has 19 goals and 5 assists. For a player who it feels like has been away forever, that's incredible. And I think you could see, like you were saying there, I think when he came on, I sort of remember Haaland being around the 18-yard box and the ball coming into it and him desperate to shoot on goal, and I think he had an air shot and he was so frustrated with himself, and it was like, that's the sort of rust that you expect to see when a player's just come back. But his appetite for goal is going to be uncontested, and if he can come back and perform at the levels he did prior to his injury and last season, City could be unstoppable, and that forward line can just be forgotten about. The rest of the team, that picks itself. But one of the questions Pep was asked about Alvarez is, how does he make the step up from being a top tier professional to being world class? So do you think that he could achieve that at City, being in Erling Haaland's shadow, in inverted commas?
Probably not. In relation to the second half of the question, I don't think he can achieve that while Erling Haaland is at City, basically, because if it's a toss-up between the two, you're always going to go for Erling Haaland. For similar to what you just read out, Haaland's goals and assists are more than a goal a game, despite him, not being at his best this season, even before his injury. So it kind of depends on what Alvarez wants to do and where he wants to be. And, we've sort of had years of Phil Foden talking about, where his best position is and where he wants to play. Alvarez is the same, he still insists he wants to be a 9. And if he wants to be a 9, then he can't develop into a world-class number 9 until Erling Haaland's there, because he's not there, because he's not going to, get picked over him. So, if he wants to develop and play with Haaland, in a way that he played with Messi during the World Cup, then maybe. But as it stands, if Alvarez is set on being a 9, then he's not going to become a world-class 9 while Haaland's at City.
So then moving down the list, we've got the conversation about Doku and Grealish. It's something that's been sort of plaguing this podcast since pretty much Doku signed. Like, Doku keeps playing or starting over Grealish, and he seems to be favoured to Grealish. Now, is that because Grealish is underperforming, or is this Pep's tactical mind keeping Grealish fresh for the sort of second half of the season, the run-in?
Yeah, I mean, Grealish had played a lot. He'd started 8 games in a row, kind of December and January, and then he was ill before the Newcastle game and missed. Was kind of only just on the bench. He was white as a sheet throughout that night, but then obviously hasn't played against Tottenham and hasn't played against or didn't start at least against Burnley. So he's had three games where he's not started, and Doku has started 2 of those. So it's kind of, again, a bit like we were saying, like, the competition for places. If you lose your place, you have to work really hard to win it back. I think there have been tactics involved at both times. With kind of it was particularly chaotic for the Burnley game with Doku and Nunes and De Bruyne and Foden all in that attack. It was really quite interesting to see. I would kind of expect Grealish to start at Brentford. I think Pep will want a bit more control, but also Grealish hasn't played now for knocking on a month. So if you want him to pick up the rhythm, then he needs to get a start under his belt. So I think, maybe next week we'll be talking about a bit more of a balance between the two, but it does, feel like you're like, oh yeah, Grealish hasn't started in a while.
Yeah, because again, looking at their stats, they're very, very similar actually. Doku's played 23, scored 5, 6 assists, and Grealish has played 24, scored 3 with 2 assists. So as it looks on paper, stat-wise, Doku's slightly ahead. But we all know the importance of Jack Grealish. His experience, he's 28 years of age now. His experience is key. Doku's, is he 21, 22 this year? And he's like a young kid who's just been let out of the nursery, and he's like running around wanting to get involved. So he's obviously got a lot of learning to do to become the best Man City player. But he's doing really well, and it's really positive to see that. But do you think there's pressures on Jack Grealish to outperform him, or do you think that he's relatively safe and Doku's more like a future-proof rather than a replacement?
No, I think there's definitely pressure on Grealish, as there has been throughout his time at the club, because there's pressure on all of them to perform well enough to keep the place. Erling Haaland knows that if he's really struggling, then Alvarez is there to take over from him. So there's never a time when any City player can feel comfortable, maybe other than Rodri, I suppose, or Calvin for his debut at West Ham. It's a case where Grealish knows he can be confident in what he brings to the team, but he can't be confident that will be what Gvardiol wants from the team every week. So, again, we're coming up to the point where Grealish really hit his stride last season and was pivotal for quite a few months. So he will want to get back to that as quickly as possible. And he can only do that by starting games and influencing them.
Yeah, and just on the subject, you mentioned Calvin Phillips. It's a good segue, really, for the idea that the Euros are coming up, and we've seen the chaos that's been going on at Manchester United with Marcus Rashford. Jack Grealish could be looking at that, thinking, while he's out of form and not being great and not scoring goals, it's an opportunity for me to secure that left wing spot for the England team. But it sort of feels like at the moment, both him and Marcus Rashford, despite Rashford scoring last night, there's no standout for that left wing role in the England team. And I will link to Calvin Phillips. We've sort of got that in the notes, that his nightmare start for West Ham. He's obviously moved to West Ham in the hope that he can go there and get some minutes in his boots and get in that England team. And I think the England assistant was watching him last night in the stands, and he passed the ball or deflected off him or something.
Passed it straight to Solanke, yeah. Yeah, no, I think with Grealish, I think it's very difficult because it's sort of like the public perception versus the coaching perception. And Grealish was this the reincarnation of Paul Gascoigne, according to some people, when he was at Aston Villa, and every performance was eye-catching, and he dribbled past 40 men, and it seemed like he tried to do more and more and more to get Gareth Southgate's attention, especially during the Euros during COVID. It was 2021 it ended up being, and it was like the more and more he tried, the more Southgate would say, no, I've got better players for that position. And Southgate wanted more defensive responsibility from him. And it was kind of, some people might choose to think that Southgate just sort of saw his move to City and said, all right, he's a City player, I'll pick him. But Southgate saw the improvement to his defensive responsibilities and his all-round game that he made under Gvardiol, and said, yeah, he's more of a player for me now. And so Grealish is less eye-catching than he might have been at Aston Villa. And a lot of people don't like that, and that's fine. But he's also more valuable to Gareth Southgate and the England team, just as he's very valuable to Pep Guardiola and the best team in the world, for the changes that he has made and the way that he plays. So If I was a footballer, I think I would probably rather have my club manager and national team manager happy with what I'm doing than, the general public that are going to be in Box Park watching the Euros. So it's kind of, it might not be the most popular thing, but he is doing the right things, and you would expect him to be quite an important part of the Euros. And in a similar way for Phillips, Phillips has got so much credit in the bank with Southgate, because Southgate likes what he does and likes what he brings to the England team, just as he now likes what Grealish brings. So it was a particularly brutal start for Phillips at West Ham to kind of pass the ball inside his own penalty area to the opposition player to give them an open goal for the first goal. But it wasn't a great pass from Zuma to him, but it just kind of sums up his time since he came to City. But he's got a good manager, he's got a good club with West Ham and David Moyes, and he will hope that is enough to get him on the plane.
Yeah, well, talking about transfers, Manchester City's incomings and outgoings in January were low, as expected. But the sort of probably the most eye-catching one was the Morgan Rogers deal, which didn't include Manchester City, but City benefited from it. So let's have a look at what City... So City brought in Alex Alcala from LA Galaxy. They brought in Claudio Echeverri. My apologies for my pronunciation. And we saw Nahul Ferrezi go to Sao Paulo, 4.3 million euros. Zach Steffen left, Luis Florini, Slobodan Tedic, Calvin Phillips, Claudio Echeverri went back out on loan, and Alfie Harrison left on deadline day to Newcastle. So, nothing really very exciting to there, but for what fans may be interested in, why did so many of those players leave, and did they have no chance of really getting in City's team?
Yeah, Harrison's probably the most interesting one. He's been at City's academy for a good while and has been really, really good in the under-18 side this season and kind of last season a bit as well. But very exciting player to watch, lots of potential, and whenever you lose a player to another Premier League club, and you could call Newcastle a Premier League rival, certainly they're trying to replicate City's success in their academy. It's worth noting why that player has left and what they could develop into. Harrison's still pretty young, so it's quite a small fee that Newcastle have paid for him, but there's the potential for it to be 3.5 million, and there's also a 40% sell-on fee, which is, if Harrison really takes off, then City are taking a lot of profit on a player that they've developed. So it could turn into significant business. And you look at Morgan Rogers going to Aston Villa in this window. When Morgan Rogers left in the summer, there wasn't really much made of it. Because he'd not made an impression at City really, but within 6 months, he's back in the Premier League, and City have got a few extra million because of their policy of transfer clauses that they put in. So it's a sign that even when City let players go because they realise that they won't make it at City, they always kind of protect their interests for the future. And I'm going to take a glass of water now because my voice is dying.
Let's talk about this lad from River Plate. I think City are sort of getting their fingers in the pie of the South American market. We've got Julian Alvarez who's come through, and I think a lot of the players that they look at go through the City football group sort of pool before they eventually get to Manchester City. But there's been a lot of excitement around this kid. His name seems to be popping up here, there, and everywhere, and the suggestion is that he could be a future star. What do you know of him, if anything?
Not very much, to be honest. My knowledge of watching the Argentine league is not quite up there. I'd like to say I'm not hipster enough for it, but I just don't have enough time. But I'm probably not hipster enough anyway. Yeah, City's recruitment in South America is terrific, and they signed Alvarez in 2022 for 14 million, and he has probably added a 1 before the 14 now in terms of his value. So, if you wanted to look at it in this way, they've kind of got £100 million of which to try and unearth the next Alvarez. And Echeverri is a lot younger than Alvarez. He's only 19, and he will stay and develop at River, but it's a case of it's sort of like the anti-Robinho. City made such a splash with the Sheikh Mansour takeover in 2008 and buying Robinho, but it was kind of noted that like all the best South Americans went to other leagues before coming, and City got some success out of Robinho and had amazing success out of buying Sergio Aguero from Atletico, but they would have had even more success from buying Aguero if they got him straight from South America. So it's that kind of like making City your first stop in Europe, as a way to saving money on transfer fees in the future and getting them while they're still emerging rather than when they've already exploded in Europe. So, we don't know whether Echeverri will be a really good signing, an amazing signing, or someone whose name you're reading out in a few years and they've not made any impact at City. But it's got potential, and when you look at the sort of track record of the recruitment team, particularly in that area, you can't ignore it.
Yeah, and obviously City have got so much credit in the bank in terms of the success that even if he isn't a success or he becomes a bit of a squad player, rotation player, if that, nobody's going to really turn their nose up too much at City because, like I said, they've probably replaced him 4 times by then anyway with better players. So yeah, it's been a quiet January for City. Obviously, the online transfer fans who love a transfer story will be disappointed pretty much with City's business. But summer is coming up, and you never know who City are going to recruit in the summer. But Si, we'll end part 2 there. I think there's quite a lot of information there, so we'll cut that down now, and then we'll be back in a second to talk about Brentford versus Manchester City on Monday. Welcome back to part 3 of this Manchester City Talking City podcast with myself, Seb Parkinson, and Simon Bajkowski. Si, City away at Brentford. You, a nice trip to London on Monday night. What a lucky man you are. City's last 2 games against Brentford have ended in defeat. So what's going to happen this time?
Yeah, I think we can write off the second of those defeats with it being it was the last game of the Premier League season. City had already won it. They were already on the beach thinking about the FA Cup and Champions League final. But Brentford are a very good team. Thomas Frank is a coach who gives Gvardiol and City and probably most teams in the Premier League more to think about than most. Brentford very good track record for set pieces. We were talking about City's earlier. City actually took one of Brentford's set piece analysts to the Etihad to work with Carlos Vicens. So there's been a lot of good going on at Brentford in recent years, which is why they've been able to get where they are in the Premier League and stay there. So they've kind of had a bit of a mixed bag of a season, but they've also got Ivan Toney back and scoring, which makes things a bit more tricky for City, I think.
Yeah, because obviously he's been out for so long. City have not really been able to analyse Brentford's performances with him in the team. So it's almost a bit like a wild card, isn't it, that he's back in. And granted, they could just look at last season and hope that it's going to be the same. And you know what, Pep Guardiola is quite intense with his preparation. So you imagine that they're trying to cover all bases, but it does throw like a nice spanner in the works for somebody watching, going, what if City could come unstuck? Ivan Toney could score that that free kick where he moves the ball 17 yards to the right again.
Yeah.
So obviously we're recording this before the press conference. So just to make everybody aware, it's 11 o'clock in the morning. City's presser is at 1:30 today. But Si, for what you do know, what do we expect the team news to be? I mean,
the only sort of outstanding team news is if Manu Akanji is fit enough to make the squad again, which he may well be because he's been training for the last few days. And hasn't been out for that long. So I think for the first time we could see a fully available squad for City this season, which would be a real boost for them going forward. And yeah, I think you would kind of be interested to see whether De Bruyne starts again, having started on Wednesday and playing 70 minutes. I think he's, with the gap between the games, he's got enough to start. And then, yeah, does Erling Haaland come back in? I think it's going to be, a difficult game in which he won't get much to feed off, not like kind of the last 20 minutes at Burnley. So it's kind of whether like Gvardiol said after the game, it's a nice headache for him because it is kind of just which way does he want to go tactically? What tactically is the best way to beat Brentford? And he's got all the options he could wish for, whichever way he chooses.
Yeah, and I think the benefit to City playing on Monday night is that all the other teams will have played. Arsenal and Liverpool obviously play each other, so a draw there would probably be a good result for City to close that gap and potentially, give them more of a motivation to go ahead. I think Pep was saying, wasn't he, in his post-match presser about the pressure on the players, and the players perform better when they're under that pressure. So to play after Arsenal, Liverpool, to know that whatever their result is could give City's players the motivation to go out there and win. But from a starting 11 perspective, what do you reckon we're looking at? I reckon Ederson will start in goal.
I think Ederson might start, yeah. And then probably Walker, Stones, Diaz, Ake, and then Rodri, Foden, De Bruyne, and then Bernardo Silva, Jack Grealish, and I think Julian Alvarez might get the nod again.
Ooh, well, City don't play Everton until the weekend, so they've got a good break. So, yeah, ease Haaland back in. Maybe give him 30 minutes this time rather than 20. And then it's the big one. It's Copenhagen. So hopefully Haaland will be back to full fitness then. But can I get a score prediction, Si? What do you reckon? I'm going to go 3-0 City.
Ooh, I think it'll be 2-1 City. I think it'll be tight.
You reckon they'll go 1-0 up or 1-0 down?
I could see them going 1-0 down. They've never won comfortably against Brentford. It's always been tight and edgy, and I can see it being like that for at least some of the game on Monday.
Yeah, 1989, City beat them 4-1. Ever since then, it's been 1-0, 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, 1-0. So, yeah, not expecting a high-scoring game, so my prediction of 3-0 is probably out the window already. So, I'll throw this in. Ivan Toney to score or assist anytime. Kevin De Bruyne.
I hope you're not throwing bets in.
No, but that's my prediction. This is what I would predict happen. Usually when I predict something happening, it never happens. So I'm recording this so that I can say if it happens, I can go, look, I made a prediction, it worked. So I reckon Ivan Toney will get on the score sheet or an assist, and I think De Bruyne will be on there somewhere. That's it. Right. Usually what I go with. But right, well, thanks for joining me, Si. We won't be back on Monday for the listeners, because City play Monday, of course. So we're going to be recording Wednesday. We will be in the studio, you'll be pleased to know. And I don't know at the moment who the host's going to be. Possibly Tyrone, possibly Rich. We'll have Joe Bray back imminently. And we'll look forward to talking about a 7-0 Man City win. Right, Si. It's been a pleasure, as always. Thanks for joining me. And for the listeners, like I say, we're back Wednesday, and we will see you very, very soon. Goodbye.